today's screening of The Young Vote. This is our first screening, our first school screening of this year's festival too. We just opened the festival last night. We're super excited to start with this film. As I think you guys, I'm sure all know, we've got elections coming up. I know none of you guys are able to vote, but that's what's so critical about this film, because soon you will be able to vote. And obviously the voting that happens in our country affects all of us and affects you. And it's incredibly important that we all know how important that right to vote is and what an important duty that is. And I think there's a lot of things we don't necessarily know about why that's so important. I'm sure you guys talk a lot about it in school, but I'm hoping this film gives you an opportunity to talk about it even more. But what's amazing is that we have some really special guests with us to even drill that home a little bit further and be able to talk to you more directly. We're thrilled to have the director, Diane Robinson, here with us, as well as her producer, Patricia, and I'm super excited that we have one of the activists in the film. You're going to meet her at the end, and she can talk to you even a little bit more about all the work that she's been doing and what you're going to learn about her during the course of this film. But first, I'd love to bring Diane up just to say hi, say a few words about why she made this film, and just to thank you guys for being here. Yeah, so welcome, Diane Robinson.
Good morning, everybody. My name's Diane Robinson, and this is so wonderful. First of all, I just want to thank the Mill Valley Film Festival for having us as a part of the festival. Don't tell the other festivals, but this is our favorite festival. And, I just wanted to say hello to all of you, thank all of the teachers. I'm a former teacher myself, and before I made the pivot from working in education to filmmaking, I spent 25 years in the field, so I have so much respect for the teachers that are in the room. So thank you for bringing your students today. And just to tell you all a little bit about the film, I made this film because back in the late, I guess it was like 2016, 2017, there was a narrative going around about young people that you all don't care very much about our society. And I didn't believe in that narrative, because I had worked with young people my whole life as a teacher. And then, working to recruit actually quite a few people to teach and to become principals who were very young themselves. And I knew the reason why people were saying that is because young people were not voting in high numbers. And I knew it was complicated why that was happening. So I made this film to answer that question and to really bring clarity to everyone, not just young people, but as to how we can change that. And I hope you all enjoy the film. I'll be here to answer questions for you at the end. But I think this tells a story that's very different and one that I think is very hopeful. And I hope you all will enjoy it. Thank you.
Thanks, Diane. What'd you guys think? It's an awesome film. I would love to bring back up Diane Robinson and also producer Patricia Howell, and I am so thrilled to welcome Ariana Tulay to join us on stage as well.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you all.
How did it feel to be in the theater with everybody?
It was interesting. To sit in the back, actually. I mean, they were quiet, so I'm like dying to hear what they think. We did get feedback from one young man who's going to turn 18 who told us he's getting registered to vote.
Awesome.
So
Awesome.
That's exciting.
Well, thank you guys all so much for being here. Can you maybe tell us a little bit first, Diane, about how you even found, the activists you wanted to feature in the film, how you settled on, Sophia, Ariana, and the other young people?
Yeah, it was a real process, and it started from 2019, actually. Sophia was the first person that I chose. It was a combination of, putting out an all-call to my network, because I had worked in education for so long. I did Teach for America. I worked, in schools as a teacher. I recruited principals, so I knew I had access to a lot of young people. And probably ended up talking to over 20 or 30 people. Ariana, I actually saw speak just when COVID started through a network that I'm part of, the Aspen Institute, and it was on Zoom. And she was so powerful on Zoom, I'm like, okay, I have to meet her. And we had a conversation on Zoom initially, and then I ultimately ended up going to film her in I think it was in Louisville, and then also on her campus where she's still in school. So it was a combination of meeting people. Sophia I met just before COVID. And then everyone else I actually met during COVID, because we filmed most of the film, as you could probably tell, during, the pandemic and during a lot of social unrest in the country. So I physically was not able to start shooting in person until, we were testing. I mean, we weren't able to even get vaccinations. So it was really challenging to actually film people live. So I had to hire a lot of the crews locally and shoot through Zoom or on FaceTime. So, like a lot of productions during that time.
That's a pretty big challenge. Ariana, were you basically on board to participate in the film, and how did that feel for you, and particularly to see yourself on screen once it happens?
Yeah, so it was an amazing experience. It was really interesting how me and Diane met. So going through that process, I didn't have any expectations going in, and then getting to film while in COVID was such a interesting experience, because I felt like everybody through COVID was going through this massive transformation, and then it's kind of great to be able to see that in the film form. And yeah, I felt incredibly honored. A lot of the work that we'd been doing in Louisville was kind of grassroots, and so there wasn't a lot of visibility for it, and so I felt like this was just a great way to kind of just talk about not only the work that I was doing, but that Louisville activists were doing in general, and it was just a great way to really discuss something I'm incredibly passionate about. So I was honored, and it was an amazing experience overall.
And can you talk a little bit about what you've been doing leading up to the 2022 election?
So yeah, I've kind of been continuing my work just with voter registration and different things like that, and then just maintaining my activism. I don't know if you guys know, but with the Breonna Taylor case specifically, there's been some movement there, and it's moved to the federal level actually. So kind of justice there in that realm, and I've been really appreciative of it. And then kind of just continuing my education. I'm a political science major, so I'm just continuing to learn about the system and ways to impact it, as well as getting young voters registered.
Awesome. So I know you're eager to hear what these guys had to think. So we would love any questions from you all, and don't be shy. Yes, right there in the aisle.
Is it sometimes hard to persuade non-voters to register and inspire them to vote?
Is it sometimes hard to persuade non-voters to register and inspire them to vote?
I'd say yes and no, because I think everybody has an issue that they're passionate about. And if you can always tie it back to being this is your way to tell your elected officials what you care about, then I think people are really passionate about being able to share their views. So I'd say if you tie it back to something they care about, no, but yes, because I think the film talked about, there's a lot of barriers depending on who you are, where you come from. And so I think just reminding people that sharing your voice is important can kind of help them move through those barriers. And also just being a support system for one another to remind us that we kind of all face these tumultuous times with voting. And so if we, band together, that's a better way to get through it than thinking that you're alone in the journey.
Yeah.
First of all, incredible film, chills throughout the entire thing. But I have a question for you. So, it said in the end of the film that you were pursuing a career in law, and you said that you're a political science major. So how did those two intersect with your activism?
So there's things called public interest, and basically it just is looking at the community and kind of seeing what's in the best interest of the community and making laws pertaining to that. So that's kind of the intersection as well. And then a lot of the kind of inhibitors to voting are at the legal level. So gerrymandering, many of the people who make the decisions on where the polls are, how the polls, how many there are and what the requirements are for the polls are kind of in that government legal realm. So just being able to be in those rooms and being a voice for kind of a more open, open primaries, more open, less regulations on that kind of is what I'm leaning towards. So just any way to get into those rooms, and usually political science and law is the way to go there.
Yeah, other questions?
There's one back there.
Okay, yeah, in the back.
What are your views on conservative youth activism organizations like Young America Foundation and Turning Point USA?
So personally, I think voting and being like civically engaged shouldn't just end at whatever specific political party you're at. As the film kind of tells, I'm an activist, so I lean towards that liberal level. But you need political activism on both sides to be a democracy, as democracy is not just swaying a system to one side. It's getting the voice of all the people to be able to really see what, you know, our country needs and what our country is looking for. So as long as there is a type of organization that's willing and able to try to get people who are civically engaged to, you know, come out and vote, I appreciate that, although I may not share their political views, and that is why I think voting is so important, because it gives the opportunity to be able to kind of, you know, bump heads and, and see kind of what the people really are looking for in their legislator.
Yeah. I mean, this is on. Just to add a little complexity to it all, a couple of the young people in the film, you never really know how they're going to vote. Because, Darielle and Elena, their storyline is really interesting to me. We didn't get this in the final cut, but Elena, she was raised in a military family. She learned how to use a gun when she was very young, but she lives in the Parkland district. So she's very complex because she's like, look, I think people should have a right to guns. I just don't want to see my friends shot in school. But she never says in the film, well, she does celebrate Biden winning. But I think what's interesting about this generation is that they're moving away from party lines. So, your question is a really interesting one, and I think Ariana really hit on it. But I think it's like a muscle that we all have to use and start using, and like every other muscle, the more you use it, the better, right? So the way I view it is, and Sophia said it in the end, like, I don't really care what party, who you vote for, just vote, right? Because the louder all of you, and I think Bradley said it too, right? All of your voices should matter. So, clearly we all have our own opinions, and I think Patricia could add some complexity to this too, actually, in terms of her background. Do you want to add to this?
Yes, so I am the executive producer. I'm a military kid. I'm African American. And so when I first started voting, I thought because I'm black, I should be a Democrat, and I started voting Democrat. I was a political science major. I went to Howard University. I worked as a Congressional Black Caucus intern on the Hill for Kwesi and Fume at the time. And then I got married right out of college. And I married a man who was a Republican. And as I started to have children and build my life with him, I realized that I actually was very fiscally conservative, and there were a lot of things about the Republican Party. My father, who had been a career serviceman, you have to be independent when you're serving active duty, but when you come out, you can choose a side. He was a Republican. And so for most of my life, I voted as a Republican. And then things started to go really, really crazy in the world. And I didn't recognize, because I was really more of a moderate, I always voted my conscience and didn't recognize anything anybody was saying. I moved to Florida after I have two boys, 25 and 28, and registered as an independent in Florida. So, yeah, I mean, I feel like you have to stay informed. I feel like conversations are very important, but respectful conversations need to be it has to be respectful. We can agree to disagree, but you got to get out and vote.
Yeah, and I think, we may have made this movie for a different generation, but I think people are complex, right? And I think that Ari really speaks to it, and what I'm hoping your generation will do is vote your values, right? And vote what you believe, and forget about the party lines. Vote about the issues you care about. So, hopefully that I think helps people think about this in a little bit more of a nuanced way.
Excellent. Yes. Other questions? Yeah.
This one's for Ariana. I was really interested in the Breonna Taylor march that you went to. Can you tell me more about sort of like the vibe being there, being a part of such a big crowd, so big that I had to get, shut down by so many police? Like, how was that?
So yeah, the protest movement is really interesting because like the most early days are what like most people saw like on TV, which were those really big marches with a lot of people, which the vibe there was, you know, of one of community, one of people who understood what it was like to be in this situation, to live in a community which, you know, you felt like you were valued, and then to have a situation happen where it really showed that your life was second class to other things. But the protest movement didn't just start and end kind of with the large crowds. Louisville was protesting for up to like 200 days. And we have this thing called Justice Square Park, which is across from like the courthouse, and that is still active to this day. There's still an active protest community. So the vibe there, like kind of in the early days, was like one of community, one of, you know, hardship, because obviously we were being chased, you know, there were being, the curfew was being put up kind of as a barrier for us to kind of exercise our voice, but it's one still of community, still of trying to create that change, and just really, you know, creating the kind of civic engagement that we hope to see by just creating community. So it both was an exciting time, a scary time, but you know, the community's still there, so it's a good vibe, it's a family.
Yeah, in the back.
Like registering as like an independent, like when you're registering to vote, does that have as much? Because like I don't know, I've heard that like if you register as like a Democrat or a Republican, it like has more of an impact on your vote compared to like registering as an independent. So I was wondering if you guys could like elaborate.
Yeah. I mean, well, in California, you all can you can vote in the primaries, right, as an independent. So I would say in California, it's equal. You have as much power as anybody else in the primary. One of the big points we were trying to make is how important the primary is, and the fact that in states like Florida, where we live, you know, I'm registered, you know, in a party. I won't say which one. Patricia is registered as an independent. So we just had our primaries in Florida. She couldn't vote in the primaries. So she had no say, right? I decided to register with a party because I wanted a say in the primary, right? And I think that's really problematic, actually. So to answer your question, I think it depends on what state you live in. Right, so all of these laws are all done at the state level. And that's one of the biggest things we were trying to say in this film is pay attention to what's happening in your state, right? Clearly you need to vote in every election, but to the issues that Ari is speaking about and everyone else in the film, these laws matter even more at your state level. Right, so you know there's a massive push to make it possible through organizations like Open Primaries and Students for Open Primaries, and you can go online, and if you want to get involved in other states to help open up the primaries, you can do that by volunteering with those groups.
Yeah, I'm registered as an independent, but I get to vote in the primary.
Yeah.
So yeah, you are lucky to be in California for many reasons. We have time for like one or two more questions. Oh, there's one right there, and then we'll get to that one.
It is.
The question was about how hard, just in case you couldn't hear in the back, of how hard it must be for her to juggle her school life and her activism.
But it's worth it. I think like a lot of times with activism, one thing that like we talk about in the film, I think, is just the community that you build. I mean, civic engagement, democracy is about the people's voice, but we don't always talk about that, like when you're able to like hear others' voices, just kind of the bond that creates. And I think activism is a really great way. I feel a lot of support from people that I like commit activism with. So it is hard to balance the two, because obviously, you know, you have school, which is a main priority, and then kind of trying to say your voice to the people and kind of in government. But I think it's just about staying committed to both, and just realizing that even though it might be hard, that you know you have a community around you who's there to help you, and that the issues are important, because like we've seen with kind of in the film, like it was a 57 majority for the open primaries, and although you didn't get it passed, I mean 57% is not something to shy away from. So it's about just continuing to fight, even though you may not win every battle, you know, you're still just showing up.
And you said there's another question over on this side. Oh, over there. Thank you very much. And all the way in the back. Yep.
Is there anything that people who are too young to vote or you register to vote that can make
Anything that people who are too young to currently to vote or to register to vote can do to make an impact.
Oh my
on this.
gosh. I mean, Darielle, Elena, and Liz are in that category. Liz still can't vote, but she was out there getting people registered through her organization in Dallas. So, and Darielle and Elena, by the way, you can pre-register to vote before you turn 18. If you go on our website, we have a partnership with When We All Vote, and they will sign you up. So there are ways for you to get pre-registered before you even turn 18, to that young man in the back. And so there are a lot of ways. And, we have quite a few organizations on the Take Action button on our website, so you can go there. If there's something you're specifically interested in, come talk to me in the back. But I would say absolutely, you know what I mean? Like, get yourself pre-register your friends who aren't yet eligible to vote. And if you can't vote, like Elena, you can be out on the streets, knocking on doors, making phone calls, sending postcards, whatever you're comfortable with, to my state, and to like people within your own state. So, there's so many ways that you can be involved, especially right now. So I would encourage you to do that. It's a great question.
Yeah, and I'd also just say, like, when I was in high school, like, I wasn't able to vote, but we, like, passed legislation still. So even though you may not be able to vote on the legislation itself, being a supporter of legislation that you, like, approve of and you think, like, upholds your values, or just finding representatives that you really identify with, and just, like, saying kind of, like, what you think the values of your community should be with them, and just kind of just connecting and creating that community are all great things that I think you can do.
Well, thank you all so much for this film. Thank you so much for being here. Thanks you guys for being a great audience. Really appreciate it. This was awesome.